Welcome everybody to Funeral Nation, episode 265. That's Jeff, the Funeral Commander Harbison. I'm Ryan Thogmartin, and we have an awesome guest with us today and co-host Antonio Green, the Millennial Guy. Antonio, tell us about the Millennial Guy, and then what else do you do?
Well, let's see. I'm a fourth generation funeral director at James H. Cole Home for Funerals here in Detroit. It's my family's firm. We've been open for over 105 years now. And I graduated from mortuary school in 2006 and came on board to help my mom run the business ever since then. And that's really where I learned what it takes for a young person coming into a family business and the nuances and relationships that you have to learn how to adjust. So the people, the staff who have been running the funeral home with my grandfather, my mother, now I'm coming on board as the newbie, where people who I was calling my aunts and uncles coming up, now I'm responsible of telling them what to do or being their quote unquote boss. So I had to learn very early on what it took to adapt those relationships. First off, get their respect to show I'm actually hardworking and dedicated and not going to come in and just slouch. I'm coming in full time to work. And then showing the ideas that I do have and getting them to buy into those ideas, because if you come in as a leader and you want to do new things in the business or take the business in different directions, you have to get the buy-in of the staff and those upper level managers. Otherwise, because they're the ones that have to execute that plan. So if you don't have that buy-in to begin with, then it's not going to happen. So I learned that early on what it really took to be able
That's
to
good.
merge and bridge that gap between the generations and get that respect level from those who, like I said, who have known me since I was a baby, basically.
You went from little pipsqueak nephew to boss, which is a big gap. And so I mean, you didn't brag on yourself too much there, unfortunately. So I got to go through it. You have been keynote at NFDA, ICCFA, New Jersey conventions. You've been featured on the Brush with Death podcast by NFDA. You're speaking in Ohio this year, Michigan this year. So like you are the leading voice in death care on really bridging the gap between these generations. So let me ask you this question. You have experienced this coming up in a family firm where you were just around to where you were working to where you became boss with a lot of families. What is the number one thing that needs to happen in a scenario like that in a family owned business to be able to mesh well together?
I think acceptance. So getting everybody to be on one page and accepting that there are going to be differences across different generations. So especially in a funeral home, you've got people who are well into their 70s and maybe even 80s who are still actively working in the business every day. And then, of course, you're going to have the newbies coming in, those in their early 20s that are just getting out of school. So you're going to have a multiple generation gap a lot of times between individuals. So the quicker that you can understand that everybody has value, the older generation has that wisdom and experience that you have to learn from. The younger generation has those new ideas and new ways to adapt and take the business to a new level. The quicker you can understand that we all have something to offer, now how can we sit down and put all this together into one plan and drive the business forward is the key part.
So in that, all right, let's stay there for a second. So you're telling me that millennials have value to the funeral home, but also the ways that boomers have been doing it for generations and for decades, there's value in both of those things, both
Oh,
ways.
Yeah, of course, and that's where the breakdown happens is because the older generation, so a lot of times your boomers who are now, running the business now, they've been doing it for decades and it's been working for them and the business has been successful. So why do I have to listen to this, millennial or Gen Zer coming in the door or that has got very little experience? Why should I listen to them? They need to learn from me before that they can even put some input in. But that's not the case. You have to listen to that younger generation because they are, with things changing, especially with technology now, they're going to be more adapt to that and more willing and more anxious to change than you are. Now, on the flip side, the younger generation, if you have someone who's been in a business, and whether it's funeral or whatever, if they've been in a business for decades, for 30, 40, 50 years, they've learned things, they've gone through things that you can't even imagine at this point. So they have a ton of value in just being
Hmm.
able to give you that expertise, give you that experience, hope to try to get you to avoid those pitfalls that they went through when they were coming up in the business. So they know how to do it, they know when to do it, and they know how to avoid certain situations that you may fall into.
I love that. I love that because there's this perception that we come in as younger. I'm younger generation. I worked in a family business vault company, and I would question a lot of things of like, this doesn't make any sense. Why are we doing it this way when, man, if we just did it this way? But what I didn't see was behind the scenes of like, if we did it my way, it would work and fix that problem, but it would also create 97 other issues that had to be addressed because other processes would be broken. So you consult with a ton of funeral homes across the United States and have this conversation with them on a daily basis and help their teams in the multiple generations in their firm align. What's one success that you see, one thing that you see works every single time, and then one of the pitfalls where you see this is where we butt heads, and this is things that we need to
Well,
address.
I think getting getting people to understand they have to have the conversation. That's one thing that everybody can agree on. Unless you're just totally bullheaded or just stuck in your ways, everybody can agree, yes, let's have a conversation. Let's be open to a conversation. The pitfalls I think come in is where you don't want to change. You don't want to shift the way your business is doing something, or you think as an older or as a older generation or as an owner operator now, you think those coming into the business should adhere to what you want and shift their ways to what you want. But this new generation isn't having it. The later millennials, Gen Zers, that's not how you're going to work with them. You have to change your mindset because you are going to have to shift your business to operate around them. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, and I know a lot of people won't agree with me, but if you talk to the younger generation now, these are the people who's going to be running the business. So if we don't shift around them and get their buy-in, then who's going to be running your business in 15, 20 years?
That's good. That's good. All right. I love it. And you coach funeral homes and you consult with funeral homes and you help funeral homes do this. You come in, you give presentations, you do a lot of different things. And I would encourage you, if you are in a family funeral home and you've got, or even a larger corporation or group of funeral homes where you've got multiple generations trying to work together, you reach out to Antonio to help facilitate that because it's really what it takes. It takes an outside facilitator to see gaps and be able to bridge those together. Tell me about your book real quick, and then I want to talk about technology because you're kind of a tech wizard guy too. You love AI. So, but first tell me about your
So
book.
2021, I wrote the book "Talk to Me: Understanding the Millennial Mindset," and in it was the premise was basically what I was saying earlier: is basically growing up in a family business and having to get that buy-in from the older generation, and having to work with them. Is well, I wanted to really teach people, especially in small businesses like funeral homes, how do we bridge that gap? How is it that you need to understand each other. So that's why I wrote the book, especially for that older generation, to really understand millennials in particular, is why is it that we are so different than every other generation? And in the book, I do that by breaking down the generation into two parts. You have the older part of the generation and a younger part. And there's a vast difference. So, what I explain in the book is basically you need to know who you're working with first before you can know how to approach
Hmm.
them. If you're working with someone like our age who was born in the early 80s, we're going to be a lot different and we're going to have a lot different approach than someone who was
Yeah.
born in the mid 90s. And even just that 10, 12-year gap is going to be a whole different perspective and a whole different way of how to gauge their interests and really bring out that productivity in them that you want them to have in your business.
Yeah. So I love that because it's so true. You and I are on the older scale of millennials. Like we're almost not
Hmm.
millennials. Like I made a millennial by like a couple days. So I kind of get offended when people are like, "Oh, the millennial generation is worthless. They don't want to work. They don't," because we're labeling an entire subset of a over a decade of people that's just not true. And even the younger millennials, I employ a
Hmm.
lot of them. You employ a lot of them. Like we work with them, and what I've learned about working with millennials on the younger end is that we just have to find common ground. We got to find like they want the same things. Like the end result of what they want to accomplish is the same as what I want to accomplish. But we got to find common ground on how we're going to get there. And I have learned so much from just people in my own generation that are younger than me that grew up with different technology. Like you and I didn't get cell phones till we were, you know, I was a senior in high school when a cell phone became a thing that you
Hmm.
carried in your pocket. We played Snake all day long in class on a Nokia phone. But the younger generation, they grew up on a cell phone and even
Hmm.
smartphones. So, it's a massively different of how they use that technology. And I just think that that's so beautiful how you can come in and you can paint that picture. I would again, we'll put links for your book down in the description. So I want to move over to some technology conversation because you and I have had some big in-depth conversations around technology and death care. We just had Curtis Funk on last episode. He talked about what they're building out at Tukios and some of the technology they have, and AI has become a big part of that conversation. And I find two different camps in death care right now. Well, one of AI is bad and it's going to take our job and it's terrible and all the negative. And then the other side is like, wow, AI can really help me get more efficient inside my business, whether it's obit writing, whether it's automating certain things in an arrangement process or whatnot. Give me your perspective on AI and then some of the tools that you are keeping your eye on because I don't know that I've talked to anybody in death care other than Curtis at Tukios that is really ingrained in actually actively educating themselves around AI and a lot of the tools that exist like
Yeah,
you are.
so AI is, in a way, it gets a bad rap because it's all about how you use it. One of my favorite quotes surrounding AI is AI is not going to take anyone's job. The person that knows how to use AI and implement it in their business will. So if you have you, it's coming
Yeah,
whether you
that's
like it
good.
or not. So you've got to get on board, even understanding basic AI like Chat GPT, just getting on there, experimenting, because it comes down with bots like GPT. You've got to talk to them. You've got to learn how to talk to them. You have to do what they call these prompt settings. You have to set up these prompts because it's brand new. It's a new conversation every time you talk to it, and they're starting to come out with a new version on Chat GPT where it will remember previous conversations throughout your threads. But for now, just pretend like it doesn't know anything. Every time you talk to it, it's like it's the first time. So you have to establish that context. So if you get in there and play with it, just start off with, hey, you know what? I want some tips on how to work with millennials in the workplace. don't just ask it that simple question. Tell it, hey, I'm a second generation funeral owner who's been working in the business for 40 years. I have two children that are 25 and 30 years old. I want to know how to create a better workforce that incorporates ideas of millennials. So, as in, and the more context you can provide it, the better answers it will come out with. I think a lot of people got turned off from ChatGPT early on because they put it in, play with, oh, that's nice, it responded, gave me some information. But the more context you can give it, the richer, the more high quality those answers will be.
Yeah, so good. It's like I look at it as like you're on a first date and you want that person to know everything there possibly is to know about you, and you're having that legit conversation with ChatGPT. Like the promptings can be
Right.
paragraphs long, and the way our brains work, we're like, oh man, then we're going to confuse the
Uh-huh.
crap out of this thing. But no, it'll use those finite details to craft a more genuine response that is probably more authentic to you as a user. I had an argument with my kids are part of an online school, so I introduced them to ChatGPT, a while ago, and I'm like, yo, look, this can help you with this, and this. And I had an argument with a teacher. We'll call it a healthy debate around, he's like, no Chat GPT. And I said, here's the deal. The critical thinking that needs to be used to create the right prompt to get the right output. And that's back to your quote, is those that figure out how to use the AI technology have to be critical. It's going to take somebody that's really, really good and make them
Hmm.
better. And that's really, it's not taking anybody's job. It's amplifying the skill set that you have when you understand how to use the tool properly. And man, that's big time. So give me an example as a funeral director that's running a large family owned firm, high volume. Where is AI playing a role in just in its infancy in how you operate your
Well,
funeral
right
home?
now for us, I'm actually using it to help create and fine tune SOPs that we have in the business. So those standing operated procedures.
Define
Yes, yes,
SOPs.
standard
There
operating
it is. All right.
procedures. So, in a lot of funeral homes and don't have that in place, and which to be honest, we don't have a ton of them like real big corporate business would. But I want every single position in our business, every single department to have SOPs in place. So rather than me spending hours and hours and days literally trying to create these SOPs, I can go out and put all the information of what I have about the certain position, throw that in Chat GPT, tell it to use its knowledge that it already knows about SOPs, tell her, what it's for a funeral business of this size, give it all the context it needs, and it spits right out. First, I ask it for a process to help develop. So first, it spit me out a mapping process to step by step to build it. Then I
Mm.
take the mapping, throw that in there, and then it'll give me a full SOP. So, I mean, nothing, and don't just take it at face value. You're going
Yeah.
to have to tweak it, but I mean, it'll save hours and hours of work for what you would normally have to do, or paying somebody thousands of dollars to do, because this is what they're going to do. They're going to have to create it by hand, where now you have the ability to cut out the middleman in certain ways. And certain funeral, I know funeral
I
homes are
love
going to
it.
say, oh, especially more seasoned owners, they're going to say, well, what good does this do for our business? What good is this going to do for our industry? And what I think is going to happen, and I'd love if anybody wants to connect me, I'd love to have more conversations about this. But where I'm personally driving, and what I think is going to happen is the AI bots. Everybody's going to have their own bot that they'll train, and that bot will be able to save you time in phone calls, pricing calls. People will be able to ask the bot the questions that they would have with the director. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have those conversations, but sometimes, especially younger families, they're going to be more comfortable with going online and asking questions to a bot. And as long as it's giving accurate information, and if it goes too far, they tell them, hey, we'll have a director follow up with you to answer that question. That's a whole different way of saving time, saving money on your own staff. But then you can get
Hmm.
your not only your message out, but you can get your services out to a whole range of other people because now they don't have to call the funeral home or wait for a director to return their call. They're getting all the information they need right there on the internet and talking with a bot or corresponding with a bot. So, and a lot of people might just think like you see the bots now website, but it's way beyond that. This is an actual intelligent conversation that it can have back and forth with you. It's not just a
Yeah.
Q&A
Yeah.
bot like you go on your insurance company or your gas company's website and you're asking questions. It's just response that come back. This is a real conversation. And you can put, and one thing I did years ago is I used our website as a tool. I threw all the information that I could possibly think of on our website so people can go there and they can read through it. But people nowadays, they're not going to read through a website. They don't want to find the information. So if I can create a bot where they can go to our website and just type in, what are you looking for? And it either sends them to the page so they can read it themselves, or it tells them exactly what they want. That's the future, and that's what I'm personally looking at building.
Yeah. That's so good, man, because like I think about the other day I had to change a flight on American and I'm like I was golfing and I'm like I am not calling why I'm golfing and sitting on hold. I immediately went to
Mm,
Twitter and I asked Twitter to change my flight and they had a person on there that went back and forth
wow.
with me on Twitter because that was even easier than
Hmm.
their website. I got a faster response because the website didn't have the technology that you're talking about. It's a if this then that
Hmm.
response where Twitter could absolutely still be bot driven AI wise. It could have not been a real
Right.
person. I mean, it could have been an AI bot inside of
Yep.
Twitter that was having a conversation because I think people think of like a bot as like a if this then that, like there's only certain prompts you can't ask it a question, but like what you're talking about, the technology that's being built around AI is you would never know that it wasn't a real human being. That like it can have the empathy, putting pauses in. I have a friend here in Arizona that has a company that they've built sales bots that literally can replicate what a salesperson
Mm,
could say on the phone
yep.
with a voice. It adds in ums and pauses and like you would never be able to detect. So I love that. And one of the things you and I were also talking about inside of the bot like that is
Hmm.
training. Like we spend hours and thousands of dollars. Like it blows my mind that we're still having conversations now of how to handle price shoppers and we're still training employees on how to handle price shoppers where you're getting the same conversation every single you've trained this thing one time and it's continually learning to be able to have those conversations. Think of the hours of time and dollars that are spent. Man, I don't know. It's powerful. I'm glad you brought that up. So I I envision Antonio leading at conventions keynotes around technology and these AI conversations because you're diving deep into it and your firm is running more efficient because
Hmm.
of it. So I love that.
And
All right, we're gonna
let
wrap
me
this
ask
up.
you a
Oh,
question.
go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Jeff.
What do you see is going to be the challenge from a regulatory standpoint? Our our federal government oversees us, and it goes to the state, and we're still not really doing a great job, basically, on regulatory that we've seen recently come out with some phone shoppers.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
there's so much in there that a licensed funeral director, is only allowed to do. So how is that going to transcend into? Is this the funeral director's personal bot? How are they going to be able, in your mind, to differentiate between the two, or which direction should that go?
As far as like regulatory issues, like the funeral rule, we know they're redoing the funeral rule. I don't think, and I seriously doubt they've addressed anything regarding AI in this new rule that's coming out. So that they're going to have to, in another couple of years, they're going to have to address that because I mean, you could simply just like an AI bot comes up and you just put a link there at the bottom, the little sticky link that says download our GPL here, and essentially you've met the requirement of the funeral rule, unless they change something with the new one. But it's going to be, and that's the thing. That's the great thing about AI. I could train it to be myself. Hey, you want to talk to Antonio's bot? Here, click here, and it'll literally be a video of me, and it just is a conversation, but it's all AI generated, but it's in my voice. It's myself, my what I look like that's
Hmm.
having a conversation with you, but it's trained. I've trained it to how I speak, my knowledge base. But on the other hand, you may have a general bot where you take the knowledge base of every funeral director on your firm, put it into one bot. So now when they're talking to that bot, it has the knowledge of everyone across the board and all of their experiences. So imagine being able to take your best, three or four funeral directors. If you could have this person answering all your calls, taking out all your services, if you had them do everything, you would. Imagine having a person like that being able to communicate to every single person that calls your funeral home every single day, 24/7.
Right. Interesting.
So
Yeah,
good,
so
man.
I have one more
So
question or
good.
thoughts. What do you see, Antonio, is the biggest differences in the generations as far as their approach to funeral service?
I think right now, and it's always been this over the years, is just like we can do things a little different now. Everybody over the years has new ideas, new things to do. But I think now it's just that technology piece where we've made such a quantum leap in technology just over the last, 12 to 15 years. When I graduated from mortuary school in '06, I think only 35%, maybe less than that, 30% of funeral homes even had a website. So even moving up to 2010, 2011, only half of the funeral homes, 55% of funeral homes had websites. So we're going from that point to now where we're about to be mandated to post all of our pricing information on our websites. Even if you don't have one, you're going to probably have to create some kind of a static page just to put your pricing up there. So it's, in just a decade, we've moved from not having a website to seeing it's not even needed to about to be mandated that you have a website in just 10 years. And just from, talking on, like Ryan was saying, talking on flip phones back in the late 90s to now doing everything. Hey, you've got a computer in your pocket now. So, 25 years later, now
Yeah.
everybody's walking around with their own personal computer in their hand. Like you could do everything on your phone basically that you can on a laptop or a desktop now. So I think that's the biggest difference is just that quantum leap in technology we've had over the last 20, 25 years that makes it different from dealing with generations now than in previous generations.
Sure, and you also have the challenge, and you're in a wonderful position to do this, where you're affecting change with the generation before you, but you're going to have the pleasure of affecting change to the generation behind you.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting is, as I'm living through some of that. We all do as generations go through. I look up in the mirror and see my dad, and so as you're going into the future, some of your conversations that you had with the um, baby boomer group, you may find yourself at some point saying the same things
Mm-hmm.
to this generation
Yeah.
behind you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by you getting ahead of the curve as you are now and starting to prepare, recognizing that those differences need to be addressed, the biggest one is conversation.
Yep.
I think that's what lacks in our entire world, anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
If we actually have a conversation with each other, we can solve a lot more than trying to guess what this other person's motives or thoughts are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then too, being able
That's good.
to just simply teach them, well, maybe not simply, but having the motivation to teach the younger generation, especially in our profession, the importance of what we do and why we do it. And especially in a family owned business, we have traditions. This is why we do things. This is what the community expects of us, being able to instill that in them and show them why it's important. You can tell someone all day, this is what we do, this is what we do, this is why we do it. But until you can tie it in and show them and give them anecdotal stories about this is why it's so important, those are the conversations I think that'll be most valuable to the younger generation, so they truly understand, like, oh well, this extra work that I had to do or this extra step that I had to take is because of X, Y, and Z, or because this, so this won't happen, so we can avoid these pitfalls of what's happened in the past. And our standard of excellence, at this funeral home, this is what meets us, this is what gets us to our standard of excellence.
Good stuff. Woo! We can probably talk all day on this. All right. So, wrapping up, you also just launched I believe,
Bi
weekly
Bi-weekly.
email newsletter that is all bi-weekly content that is curated around that conversation of bridging the gap with millennials and how to make it happen. And so we're gonna put the link for that.
Yep, free.
It's free,
Yep,
right?
free
People can
newsletter. Just
subscribe to it.
subscribe. Yep.
Awesome. We'll put the subscription link in the description below as well. Any parting thoughts, Antonio? Like, how do people get a hold of you if they wanna go? Okay, we need to have this guy a part of our firm and have this conversation. How do they make that
Easiest way is
happen?
just go to my digital business card, biz, coachantonio.com, bizcoachantonio.com, or meetantoniogreen.com. And just connect with me on there. I'd love to have the conversations, especially in our industry, with owners and operators about how we can collaborate together. Those forward thinkers in the industry, those are really the people who are going to take it to the next level. So I'd love to continue the conversation outside of the
Yeah.
conventions. I always have great conversation at the conventions I speak at. So I'd love to keep that up throughout the year between conventions. So feel free to reach out to me. If you want me to come and speak at your organization or even at the funeral home and talk to your staff, I'm more than open to travel. I just love meeting people in our profession and helping the small business out. That's one thing in my book, especially, that I preach on, is keeping the small business in the family, not having to sell to a larger conglomerate or just simply close your doors because you don't have anyone to take the staff and keep the business going. So being able
Mhm.
to keep the business going and keep it in the family is what I'm passionate about helping families with.
Love it. Awesome. Okay. Antonio, you're the man. Thanks for hanging out with Jeff and I. And thank you to C&J Financial for being the rocket fuel that keeps this show moving forward. Jamie and Jeff and Rob and the whole crew over there. Thank you, C&J, for being our title sponsor of the Funeral Nation show. Until next time, have a great
Thanks,
effing
Same
guys.
week.
here.
Take care.